to the killer who may be in this room. We believe you are hiding in plain sight. You never thought we would shift gears to a different investigative strategy, but we have. We know that this is about power to you, and you want to know what we know. And one day, you will.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Nancy Grace outside the courthouse in Delphi. Thank you for joining us here. Cheryl McCollum, Susan and I were sitting side by side in the courtroom all day, and a lot came out from this one psychologist who was very unfamiliar with her notes. But that said, her notes were invaluable. She did a fantastic job documenting what was happening every time she saw Richard Allen. She really did a good job on that. We learned, and this is before, and Susan, jump in if I'm wrong, before it came out, Cheryl, we learned that Richard Allen had confessed to having a gun, targeting the two girls, hearing a male approach, I couldn't tell if it was in a car or not, covering their bodies with branches, intending to rape them. We now know they were naked. That wasn't released. He talked about cutting their throats. We didn't know that the perp had a gun. We didn't know that their throats were cut. We didn't know that they were, one, totally undressed, both of them totally undressed at one point. He says his intent was to rape them. He explains that away by saying his, quote, his problem, that's what he's calling it, started when he molested his sister when he was younger. I mentioned the branches. He revealed so much that had not been made public, Cheryl.
He said things only the killer would know. He said branches, not twigs, not sticks, but long branches. He said he had a gun. Leggett testified that on the video, you can hear a gun racket. He also said,
oh man, that's right. Hold on. You just reminded me of something, Cheryl, and I thank you. Hearing the gun rack. I mean,
Yep.
That corroborates finding the bullet there. He didn't know when he racked the gun, he released a bullet. So, to Susan Hendricks, can you hear a gun racking in the video the girls took?
Yes, 100%. Absolutely.
Describe it.
That's what you hear. That's a gun. You hear, but you absolutely hear the gun.
What do you mean you can hear the gun? Hear the gun do what?
Do that sound. Shh. Like the end, Detective
You
Holman
mean-
held up the gun and did it in court 2 days ago. Like shh, and it was frightening to the jury.
Okay, I finally got that out of Susan Hendricks. Remember, I'm a JD, not a DDS. I don't know how to pull a tooth, but I can declare you a hostile witness and cross-examine you, but you know that. Joining me right now is Dr. Mark Mirabello. He is a professor emeritus of history, Shawnee State University, and author of the Odin Brotherhood. Dr. Mark Mirabello, the defense has tried and tried. They've been rebuffed about bringing in the theory that Odinists did these murders. Odinists represent Norse, they worship Norse gods like Thor. Okay, I didn't know that was a thing. Apparently it is, according to your book, The Odin Brotherhood. But how could the defense, Dr. Mark Mirabello, spin the fact that these girls were stripped naked, they were murdered by slashing their throats, they were left out in a wooded area and then covered in branches? How does that in any way indicate Odinism? Because the defense has not given up. They're still trying through lines of cross-examination to establish enough facts to bring in Odinism. They're still trying. So how does that equal Odinism, Mark?
I've studied Odinism for over 30 years, and I've never witnessed a sacrifice of animals or humans. First of all, I noticed there's a lot of confusion over this issue. In Great Britain, they're called Odinists. In the United States, the most common name is Asatru. And for some reason in America, some academics and scholars and hate watch groups seem to associate the radical behavior with Odinist only, which is frankly not true. You can get the Asatru Alliance, Asatru Folk Assembly, which are really conservative. Now, they don't talk about killing or sacrifice. The difference is the extreme left will have black members, they'll have gay marriages. And on the extreme right, they're opposed to gay marriages, they're opposed to gay sex, generally speaking. And by the way, they view Odinism as an ethnic movement, much as Shinto is for Japan, and also as voodoo is for Haiti. A lot of voodoo practitioners object to Caucasians telling their secrets. So again, they don't do these violent things. And I remember saying before, and I just try to be really brief on this, given their interest in, frankly, white people, the radical Odinist on the right, there is no way, absolutely no way, they would kill two white girls. Again, I've said this many times. They say, not that it's true, but they say 8% of the human race is white, 2% are women of potential childbearing age, and there is no way they would kill two white girls. They believe they have to save the white race. It's becoming extinct. And again, if they kill anybody, it would be what they call a race traitor. That's a white woman dating a non-white man. So there's nothing in Odinism that would justify this. And I'm not trying to get the fellow involved convicted. I'm just dealing with the facts. There is nothing in Odinism that would include the murder of two little girls, especially the murder of two little white girls, or the sacrifice of these girls.
Dr. Mark Mirabello, that's more than I could ever have imagined. I did not want to interrupt you. I wanted to hear every word of that. Other than the branches and apparently twigs in the girl's hair, at one point it was argued that there was a letter, I think it was an F as in Frank, on a tree. That blood marking turned out to be a transfer. I just don't see how they can establish this far-fetched theory of Odinism. And, you know, Eric Faddis, I keep seeing online, hey, dummy, the judge overruled Odinism. It can't come in. But that hasn't stopped the defense from asking questions to support answers that they believe will build a foundation, Eric, to convince the judge to allow in Odinism. They're doing it on cross-examination with some of the witnesses. What do you think about that, Eric?
Oh, sorry. One thing I think is that a lot of people believe Judge Gold has been pretty hostile towards the defense, excluding this Odinism defense in its entirety, which some people think is a heavy-handed ruling. You know, in listening to the other expert, the KKK lynched white people too, even though they were aligned with white people as racial extremists. So I don't think that that rules out the possibility of this Odinist sacrifice involving two young white girls. These defense attorneys are simply trying to advocate for their client, put forth a reasonable, plausible, alternative explanation, which I think they're entitled to do, and I think this judge is handcuffing them.
Eric Faddis, are you familiar with a line of cases that find it to be reversible error if the judge disallows the defendant's sole defense?
Certainly, yes. That's in case law throughout the country, including in Colorado, where I practice.
So, bottom line, as far-fetched as this Odinist theory might be, I'm concerned that it's totally ruled out. But I'm sure the judge knows the law in this jurisdiction better than I do. I'd almost be mad if they didn't bring it in. I can't wait for the jury to hear an Odinist claim. But that said, joining me right now is forensic certified bloodstain pattern analyst, senior crime scene analyst, and death investigator, Jeffrey Gentry. Now listen to this, author of Forensic Science, Applications to Death and Crime Scene Investigations. I'm trying to figure out, Jeff, if there is a way based in the forensic evidence, specifically the blood evidence, that can support or destroy an Odinist defense, because I don't think the door is totally closed on that defense. I think if the defense can get enough facts in during cross-examination, they will revisit to the judge, look, we've shown you 1, 2, 3, and 4 with the state's own witnesses on cross. That gives me a foundation to bring in Odinism. So how can the blood evidence be used to support an Odinist theory?
Well, it can definitely be used to contradict that theory. Based on what the professor talked about, it sounds like there could be some rituals associated with it. But the blood evidence is really good because it explains events. It explains how these two girls were murdered. It explains that one was possibly bound and then murdered in the place they were found. It explains that the other was standing up next to a tree and bled out, and then was moved. And I have actually investigated cases where bodies have been covered. I've been doing death investigation for over 16 years, and I've handled well over 300 homicide cases. And I've had bodies that were covered with branches. I've had bodies that were covered with tarps. I've had bodies that were wrapped and um, planning to be burned. So I've seen a lot of that. And it's always because the person realizes they've done something wrong and they have to quickly conceal that body before they leave the scene. So there's nothing there to suggest that Odinism happened or there was some ritual associated with these killings. It's somebody that acted on impulse. They killed these two people quickly, left the scene in a hurry, and so that would, in a sense, debunk that theory.
Jeffrey Gentry, you really hit the nail on the head just then. To Cheryl McCollum, how many cases have you and I dealt with when I was prosecuting, you were investigating, where a murder victim is covered up with anything? It could be branches, as in this case, and you said branches, long branches. It could be a sheet. I've had a case that I covered, didn't try it, a case that I covered where the killer put a wicker bathroom trash can over the dead woman's head. We see faces covered with a sweater or clothing. It happens all the time. What am I supposed to believe? That the Odinist did all that?
Exactly. And he tells you he did it, and he tells you the motive. He was intending to rape them. And I want to talk a little bit about the blood myself. That blood on the tree is clearly a transfer from Libby. Libby also had 5 droplets on her thigh. That wasn't Odinism either. That's not some big secret. It was literally dripping from the injury to her throat.
I want to comment again on all the facts that came out in court that support the evidence. The facts that came out from his confessions in court that support the evidence. Susan Hendricks, I kept looking at him and I can see how he's trying to alter his appearance. The psychologist got on the stand and said he's totally, she took him off constant suicide supervision because he was speaking coherently. He even said, I'm not going to kill myself. I'm too much of a coward to kill myself. I don't want to die. He wanted to apologize to the victims' families. He found religion behind bars, started sleeping with his Bible, and wanted to confess. Now, how in the hay are they going to spin that out? And another thing, Susan Hendricks, and everybody on the panel, feel free. We're not having high tea at Windsor Castle with Prince William, okay? Another thing is when you look at his change of appearance, you hear the facts that only the killer would know. The video places him there, but also, I'm wondering if his wife is still believing him. What do you guys think? What about it? Susan Hendricks, go ahead.
It appears she does, because when I look over and I see her crying and she's whispering with Richard Allen's stepfather, and the fact that she's willing to get on the stand for those Google searches says she's with him. I remember it was early on during one of the hearings. She looks over at someone sitting next to her and loudly says, "That's my man. That's my guy." So I feel like they've been together for so many years since high school. I do believe she's still backing him. And you're right, his appearance looks so much different.
Well, wait a minute. Susan Hendricks, hold on just a moment. Yeah. There's, Cheryl, what about this? It's not so much that I'm sorry I did it. I just don't want to go to hell for it. I'm not convinced that she believes him. She just doesn't want him to be convicted, to have the father of her child convicted and sitting in life behind bars. I mean, how can she not hear this evidence?
Forget the evidence. He told her he was there. She has seen the video. She has heard his voice. She knows it's him. In her heart, she knows it. Now, whether or not she can believe it ever, that's a whole different story. But she knew long before anybody else. She wasn't posting on social media about the girls. She wasn't posting the posters. She wasn't, telling everybody, oh, who in the world could this possibly be? She saw him on the photograph. She heard the voice. She knew the clothes, and he told her he was there.
Okay, two things. Number one, the whole community is out looking for these girls when they're missing. Everybody. Guys, I can't tell you how small of an area this is. It's like where I grew up in rural Bibb County. I mean, you would have to know how to get here. I got lost in the dark this morning, and that's with a navigator with me, trying to get here. I missed the turn. Managed to circle back. You have to look to find this place. Then you have to look again to find the bridge, the Monon High Bridge. You don't just know that it's there. It's not a tourist spot. You have to live here to know how to find it. So while this very small community, what is it, less than 3,000 people? While everybody's out looking for the girls, where is he? He's not looking for the girls. I have not heard one thing about him trying to help find the girls. But the other thing, Cheryl, you want to tell me he's perfectly normal, cognitive, coherent, and all these times he speaks to the psychologist. Then he says to his wife, I did it. I effing did it. Why don't you believe me, woman? Then she goes, stop saying that. Calls the lawyer. The lawyer gets with him and suddenly he starts eating paper and drinking out of the commode. He didn't do any of that before his wife called the lawyers.
Nancy, the only thing that I can think of, and keep in mind, I've known Walt since I was 14. Some level of me would have to protect our children. I just could not believe it. I could not allow this to be true for them. That to me is the only thing she can be doing.
Okay, I appreciate that, but I asked you about him suddenly drinking out of the commode and eating paper.
Again, the 9 police officers that testified, we heard them. They said he watched us and waited until we were looking at him to wash his face with the toilet water, drink the toilet water, smear the feces. He didn't do it when he wasn't under surveillance.
We are all headed back into the courtroom. I want to thank my guests for being with us, analyzing and shedding light on what we know right now as the facts continue to unfold. Nancy Gray signing off. Goodbye, friend.